for those who are listening right now, welcome to Squatch on Radio. Today, our start was a little off compared to the way we normally start it, but it's all good. We're all here, and here for another amazing episode here. It's a Friday night here where we go live with our main show. And for those who've been listening, we've been having shows throughout the week, which is normally what we don't do. But we've been trying to cover a lot of bases lately, and it's actually been very interesting. And so we have a very awesome lineup for tonight. Mr. Darby Orcutt he'll be joining us shortly, which he is on the line. He is on standby right now, and we'll be bringing him in here very shortly. I don't think I was able to cover every speaker. I know between a couple of the other radio shows, they've been trying to grab who they can as far as they've been trying to help with us promote this event by, bringing speed. I know actually one or two of them actually had you on, haven't they? Zach?
Yeah, Paranormal Files 13 had me on, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago.
That's
and
right.
Actually, that was actually the one show, the latest show I've been on. The latest show before that was back in March whenever I was on Night Callers.
Okay. Yeah, Paranormal Files, yeah, Robin Nelson. He is an awesome guy. He's very awesome. He's been plugging and sharing and promoting our event as well. And he says it hasn't stopped him. He's actually got a little caught a little mockery over that, because that's not what he normally does. He's more paranormal, but his radio show, he normally covers more of the wrestle. Because his podcast is a wrestling podcast where he connects with other wrestlers and stuff. So the Bigfoot thing is slightly different, but he's really into that. And he hopes he could join us this year. He's not able to attend this year, but he definitely hopes to be there next year. And and I do appreciate Robin Nelson and the Paranormal Files, promoting our event. I tell you what, Zach, our event is looking huge. When I say huge, I'm making it sound like it's going to be millions of people there. But the thing is, we may not be the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, but the thing is, there's a lot of support behind this, and that's what's making it huge to me, is the support. I don't care if it was only just 50 people there. It's, to me, the way everything's working out is still going to be huge. But as of right now, we're roughly looking at around about 300 people, and that's just based off of our ticket sales, vendors, speakers, and so. Thing is, I have people contacting me left and right about, is there going to be tickets available at the door? So we're going to have a lot of people who have not bought tickets online show up at the door, which, I hope that's a big turnout right there. It's hard to say, because when people ask you, well, how many are you expecting? I say, I don't know what to tell you. I'm hoping it's going to be big, but the thing is, I can only give them a partial, so. I don't know. It's just exciting. We're so close. I know I'm getting nervous. Like I said, I'm excited but nervous.
I'm nervous. I was just down at my grandparents', and I was rehearsing my speeches and everything, and I was talking top of my lungs, and Mom's working last minute, making all of her stuff to sell at our table. She's inside right now working on it.
Well, I'll tell you what. I've held a couple local seminars here. Actually a couple of them at the local library in the conference room here in Waynesboro, and I've had one at a bed and breakfast out here. And tell you what, they've actually all worked real well. The last one I had was at the conference room downstairs of the Waynesboro Public Library, and that's a pretty big room. And we've had a nice turnout there. And that's when Michael Cook came up from Kentucky to be a part of that seminar, and which was really good. He put on a really nice presentation and a little demonstration, because he invited up a couple of young kids on stage to do a footcast, basically showing the footcast walk, with a human natural step, and of course the kids got, he probably part of it was because he was showing how to properly make a cast and all that, and so the kids got to keep their cast, which was pretty cool, and the families there had a good time. As far as when I've, basically what I'm getting at is at these local seminars, I didn't prepare no speech. I had my notes and everything. I had my my PowerPoint that I went through, and basically that was my guide to speak. And that's how I go about doing my lectures, is being prepared through your PowerPoints and your notes, and you just kind of go with the flow, and where basically speaking based off of your knowledge and letting your notes be your trigger for what you want to share. So that's how I've done it. And it lets you allow you to have a more, I guess you could say, easy flow of speech. But I tell you what, our guest tonight, being who he is, I think he could probably give us a little bit more rundown on that, and then, probably some better advice as far as speech giving, in lectures, because he deals with students on a daily basis. So.
Our guest tonight, I'll go ahead and I'll say he's a very fascinating individual. I had the pleasure of talking to him for about an hour and a half the other night, and we sat and talked A to Z on Bigfoot and history and everything. I basically give him the whole rundown of the history of Williamson County and my ideas on Sasquatch and everything, and if I was to try and prove something, how I would trap the creature and all that. We talked about just about everything.
Awesome. And real quick, for those who are listening, just give me 1 second. I'm actually sharing something right now.
But while you're doing that, I mean, I'm looking forward to this conference because we are 7 days away from the conference itself that you've been putting together now for over a year and a half, and my hat's off to you for this, Daniel. I mean, even whenever you started planning, there was doubt in my mind, but every bit of that doubt is gone and everything. And I'm looking forward to this. Not only am I looking forward to being able to MC the biggest thing on the East Coast for Bigfoot conferences, I'm looking forward to getting there and showcasing my team's name and all that stuff and get to meet all these people. But I'm looking forward to meeting all these friends that I've made over the years since I went public with my research 3 years ago. I'm looking forward to meeting you and Baltimore and Tracy and Michael Cook and Bill Lancaster and everybody. I'm just looking forward to meeting. I'm going to be starstruck, I'll be honest with you.
Now, Michael Cook, I need to touch base with him because I haven't spoke to him in a while, and he told me because he wasn't going to make an announcement, he wasn't going to make a big fuss about it, but I guess he kind of wanted it more of a surprise. But he told me, he said, Daniel, save me a table. He said, I'm coming up. I said, all right, but that was just a while back, so I have to touch base with him. So if he comes up, then we got a nice little group coming from Kentucky because Jennifer McDaniels is coming, and she's going to be there. She's actually the booth she's setting up. She's actually going to be having a few different. Her display is going to be very interesting because she's basically covering like 2 or 3 other people that can't be there that want to be there. One's a monster sculptor. The other gentleman is a blacksmith who makes really awesome knives. Daniel Hall is his name. And if you've seen my last knife that I got, that I showed photos of, that was a gift that he actually made. And Jennifer Daniels actually had it made. It was actually a housewarming gift because when I first moved into my house here, she wanted to do that for me as a gift, and so she had that specially made for me, which was awesome. It's a nice little Bowie knife and everything. So, which it's got my name in it. It's got a Bigfoot in it, and that's my second Bigfoot Bowie knife because my last one is like 17, 18 inches long, and it's real heavy. It's awesome. That there, I don't know if you know Ames on Facebook, this gentleman goes by Ameswell Missalot.
Yeah, I seen him the other day.
Yeah, he is very gifted. He makes some very incredible knives, and his is the one I got displayed with my my deer rack that I have on my mantle, and so very awesome work, and it's good quality stuff. But I tell you what, I am rambling on. I think it's time to get our guest on the line here.
Let's have some fun. Get him in here.
Well, Mr. Darby Orcutt, you are now live with us, and you are unmuted now. So welcome to the Squatch Zone Radio, Darby. It is awesome to have you on here. How are you doing?
Well, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Zach. I'm doing well for late on a Friday night. I've got my coffee going as well.
All right. So wait, are you not really used to being up this late on a Friday night, or?
Well, you know, I've got two young sons who get up real early on Saturday morning, so I try to keep it reasonable these days.
That's understandable, you know. Well, you know, I'm glad you got on here, and we got several people listening, and Jennifer McDaniels apparently is listening because she just sent me a message. She's my ears are burning. LOL. Anyway,
I just got the same message right as you said that.
So she hears us talking about her. So, well, that's cool. At least we know we got listeners right now. Well, Darby, you know, I'm excited to have you attending and participating and speaking at our event. You know, and you know, after you know,
I'm excited to be there. I'm excited to be there.
You know, we've had a lot of interesting discussions over the phone, you know, and, you know, we've touched base on a lot of different things. But to start off with, you know, if you don't mind, I'd like to see if you can give us a brief rundown or a bio, you know, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. And if you don't mind getting in, well, we'll start from there, and then we'll kind of jump in from some other things. So I'm going to try to be careful how I add. I don't want to put you on the spot because I know I don't want you to feel nervous. We're very laid back and chill. So share what you feel. Share, you know. So how about it?
I think those who know me would say, you know, that you don't want to let me ramble on too long. I'll keep going and going. But no, I'll tell you. I'll start with kind of what I do. In general, right now, we can get into a little bit more of my background and all that if you'd like. I am on faculty at North Carolina State University, which is the largest university in North Carolina, public university, flagship school, or land grant school. We, along with our sister institution down the street, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, are the two major universities, public universities in North Carolina. And my primary faculty appointment at NC State is as a librarian. And I think that the first thing to say is forget what you think you know about librarians and libraries. My day-to-day work is very different than what one pictures. And I think, you know, that's true. That's true to a large extent of librarians in general these days. But it's especially true, I think, of me. I work primarily in two realms. One is in library collections in terms of overseeing a lot of the selection, how we spend lots and lots of public money to support the mission of the university, and on the other hand, in research support. And that's the area where most of what I do really these days has evolved to becoming support of interdisciplinary research teams. And so these are teams of scientists, of engineers, of social scientists, humanists, whatever different fields, design folks, whatever different fields are necessary to work with real-world issues, to work with research that crosses realms. And so my background, in addition to the library science background, is in cultural studies. So I look at basically how different cultures, how humans work together. That's the short way of explaining that.
Yeah.
And it's in that realm. It's in that realm that I also, for a lot of years, 15 plus years at NC State, as well as elsewhere, I've been teaching part-time as well. I've taught undergraduates, graduates. I've taught at NC State. I've taught at UNC. Particularly, what's I think of interest to your listeners has been a course that I've been teaching over the last couple of years. And it's a seminar course in our university honors program, interdisciplinary studies, that is entitled Science, Psi, Sasquatch, and Spirit.
Yeah. And
that's Psi, PSI, meaning extraordinary powers of the mind. So I started teaching this course because in my work and working with scientists and working with teams of scientists, helping put together teams of scientists, knowing a lot about how science works in the real world, I wanted to teach a course that would help students to really understand that, just to understand the cultural place of science, but also cultures of scientific practice. There's a sort of a formal way that we think of science working. Okay, you gather evidence, you have a theory, you test that theory. I mean, that's the classical thing that everyone learns in elementary school. But how does science work in the real world? How does it work in a world that's made up of human institutions? How does it work in a world where you get your funding from certain sources? How does it work? In other words, how does it work with respect to people in our institution? And I chose to do this within the context of these areas that aren't typically considered part of mainstream science. And I did that because I found that those areas I thought that those areas would be really instructive for students, because they would allow the students to ask questions that they might not ask of a more settled area of science. And this has actually proven really useful because the students get to look at these things and ask these questions, and I get to ask these questions of, why is such and such considered scientific, and why is such and such excluded from the scientific mainstream, and is it fair, or is that for a particular valid reason, or is that for some cultural reason that may have nothing to do with the science per se? And so by taking these areas of inquiry seriously and having the students look at these areas with new eyes, to take them seriously, they learn about the process of how science works. And at the same time, like I say, it raises some really interesting questions about why some of these things may or may not be excluded from the consideration of the mainstream.
Well, let me ask you, mainstream science, I mean, I guess in a certain sense or to a certain extent, a lot of us, that have been involved with or in the world of cryptozoology, a lot of us, DNA testing, all that's been in, in discussions and been laid out there on the table. All this different alleged evidence and everything. Some of us have a little familiar, we're a little familiar with science in some ways. We're not scientists, but a lot of it's, we hear about science through rumors and, and when science does get involved with a lot of what we do. My question to you is, why do you feel that science, I don't know if this is a safe way to question this, but why is mainstream science so stubborn on the acceptance of a lot of what's out there? Is it based off of reputation? Would that be a part of it? Or is there just
I
not
think that's
concrete
a big
enough?
part of it.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a big part of it. And this is, I don't want to go too detailed in that because I know we're saving a lot of that for the conference next week.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's it.
But I'll say, this has been one of the interesting things about teaching this course and doing research in this area, is that it's one of the things that I think is interesting, and is that I think that a lot of it is reputation. I think that there are, we got to admit, Bigfoot has become, not just within science, but just in mainstream culture, Bigfoot has become this example of something that, crazy people believe in that obviously isn't true, right? You might as well say unicorns, right? This is sort of the popular culture view of the phenomenon. I think that there are some historical reasons for that, and I'm going to get into those next week.
Awesome.
But I think that you have the prevailing cultural view that's saying, look, Bigfoot is just a silly idea, right? And then you have scientists who are not, by and large, looking at this alleged evidence for the Sasquatch hypothesis. They're not looking at it because, well, they know from mainstream culture that this is a silly idea, right? So why look? I've had not a scientist, but someone who is very knowledgeable of science, who, upon learning I was teaching this course, said, so how are you getting this, what are you trying to do? Get the students to think about things without evidence? And, completely unaware that there is physical evidence that can be examined to investigate this hypothesis. There are track casts. There are, certain other pieces of physical evidence. This is something that the late John Bindernagel struggled with a lot. Dr. Bindernagel, John unfortunately passed away early this year. He is someone that I never met in person, but I got to know very, very well by phone. We connected just in the last year of his life, and he was a huge fan of the course that I was teaching, and was very supportive. And it was very interesting because he and I saw what was happening was that we were coming to a similar place from different directions. I was looking at these questions of, how does science work, and looking at Sasquatch research as a lens into understanding, how science structures its ideas and asks its questions. He was coming to looking at the philosophy and the history of science through decades of trying to bring this evidence in front of the scientific community and having it not so much dismissed as ignored. And so he was getting to this cultural aspect of science and really trying to grapple with that, because he was simply incredulous as to how he couldn't get a hearing for Sasquatch evidence, for physical evidence. I'm not talking about just I think there's a perception among a lot of people that the only evidence per se for Sasquatch is firsthand accounts, and that's absolutely not true. I've seen alleged evidence that you yourself have gathered there in Virginia, track casts and such. And John dealt with this, I thought, really well in his book, The Discovery of the Sasquatch.
Yeah.
And I certainly recommend that anybody who's interested in the subject at all and has not read that book, get your hands on a copy, read that book.
Yeah, I know. I definitely would love to do that too. Just for the record, Dr. John Benton, he was, one of my inspirations in the field, because especially his background. He's a wildlife biologist, and to me, for a man of his I don't know what the right way to put this, but a man of who he stands, who he is, stepping into the world of cryptozoology, to taking on, such a subject such as Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and then, throwing his reputation out there, and and dealing with his other skeptical or non-believing colleagues, and he's put a lot on the line.
And to do it in such a public way. Yeah.
Exactly.
And to do it in such a public and that's the interesting thing. And what I find too is, because I work very closely with a lot of scientists and know them very well, and there are actually, I think people would be surprised how many of them aren't necessarily dismissive of the Sasquatch hypothesis, but they're not out there studying it at the same time. They're not out there voicing that view, but privately, right. They have an orientation towards science where this is certainly something that they would put in the realm of possibility, at least.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of debate in the Bigfoot world, when it comes to the existence and proving it, here's a question I ask every so often to a lot of different individuals, and we got people like Dr. Jeff Meldrum who's involved, and there's other archaeologists and other anthropologists who've been in this field, also staking their reputation, and some of these individuals have claimed to have sightings, and I was going to mention one, but her name is man, I can't believe her name is at the tip of my tongue, but I can't speak of it. But I'll come back to it later. But as far as people like Jeff Meldrum and everything, it's the ones that are involved. They have their belief on what something, what the subject is. I don't even know how I want to ask this, because for what I was going to present was, I kind of lost my original question here because I didn't write it down like I normally do. But now, as far as the subject of Sasquatch, what's your take on what Sasquatch is? As far as, there's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of theory based off of, depending on how every individual does their research.
Right.
If you had to kind of make a statement on that, how would you look into the subject of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, as far as what he or she is?
Well, I think that's the $1 million question, right? Is what is if it's there?
Yeah.
And I think that's the interesting thing, is that this is one of those areas where we have evidence of what appears to be this phenomenon, Sasquatch. We don't necessarily have that smoking gun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. Absolutely.
We don't have nobody's brought one in, dead or alive.
Yeah.
There's not there. I think folks can debate about the DNA studies, this and that, but we don't have a definitive study in this area. I think really the best DNA study that's been conducted in this area was that was conducted by Brian Sykes. This is the geneticist from the UK, and that he found no DNA evidence of an unidentified creature in what he looked at in North America, but he is also the first one to say, "Hey, I only looked at 30 samples." This was a very limited. There was a very limited study that he did.
Right.
Samples from Russia and from Asia and North America, and he had some very interesting results. Just the same with the Russian and the Asian samples. So that was a very well done DNA study.
Yeah.
But those are So, but again, there was nothing. There was no, hey, here it is.
Yeah,
so,
I'm familiar with that study.
I'm sorry?
Oh, no, I was just saying, I'm familiar with that study there, based off of one of the documentaries I've watched in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because there was an article that a journalist wrote a year or so ago that took that study and said, hey, look, this shows that there is no Sasquatch, which was exactly the opposite of what Sykes himself, the conclusion that he made. Hey, this is a very limited study. We didn't find evidence, but not finding evidence doesn't disprove it.
Right.
So I mean, we have to put these things into context. Beyond that, I think that there are, when I look at this, I think that we need to approach this from sort of thinking about the simple, what's the simplest reasonable explanation. So I think that at this point, as I look at this, I see absolutely no reason to go to greater lengths than saying that, hey, this is some potentially unidentified animal of some sort. And if you look at the sightings reports and the physical evidence that's been collected and all of this, certainly the most common hypothesis would be that this is some form of primate. And then the question becomes, well, how closely related to human beings may this primate be, or how similar? And I think that's where really that this would be, if this hypothesis is correct and there is such a thing as a Sasquatch out there, I think that's the really interesting question for science is, where does it fit into our understanding of creatures? But we're a long way from even knowing that we can ask that question, I think. But certainly there's a wide range of possibilities there.
Absolutely. Now, here's an interesting question. and I probably already know the answer to this, but with what some of me and you talked about in the past, as far as this question goes, well, let me ask the question first, and then we'll kind of go from there. Do you believe that we need an actual specimen, such as a body, or can we, or is it possible to find the identity of a species just based off of a piece of evidence alone? Or, you hear everybody say we need something to compare.
Yeah.
There's all these alleged pieces of evidence out there, and some of it's coming back as some type of primate, but not human. And so, they don't know what they have. So I guess in a sense, it would make sense. You actually need something to compare that to say, okay, this is what we got here. And it's not on the, it's not in the DNA records, or at least we didn't have it or whatever, or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I get what you're saying, and I think that those are interesting questions, certainly. I think that I'm going to be like a typical professor, and I'm going to say, it's really complicated. The answer to that, it's very complex. What could possibly constitute conclusive evidence would, to a large extent, depend on that question that you just asked of what might Sasquatch be. So imagine this, for example. There are some theories out there that Sasquatch is a type of human being. Okay?
Right.
I've heard this theory that they're a particular, they're a tribe of Native Americans or thing along those lines.
Yeah.
Okay. If that were true, what would a DNA sample tell you? Well, a DNA sample might tell you that they're human. Well, okay, great. You've got a sample of human DNA. What have you proven? Humans exist. Well, we knew that.
Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So you see what I'm saying? I mean, I'm being a little lighthearted here. I mean, you might be able to, but so depending on what it is now. Okay, if it's something that is, if the DNA is, depending on what the DNA is, and I think it's interesting because I think a lot of researchers have asked me, amateur investigators have asked me, hey, I've sent these things off to labs, and I get to talk with one investigator that I've coordinated with a bit, and he's taken part of the same sample and sent one of it to one lab and one of it to another lab and gotten very different results.
Oh, wow.
Like not even, like one said it was wolf and one said it was human or something like that.
What?
And, and of course he says, well, how can this be? And I think that a lot of it comes down to what are the labs looking for? What are they comparing to? How robust of a DNA sample is this? What's the quality of the lab, quite frankly? Some of these labs, I'm not real sure if they really do the work.
Thing I know
some
about
of these for higher labs, I'm not sure if they do the work the way that you would want them to.
Yeah. Some of these labs, which, I don't know how advanced some of them actually are. The reason I say that is because you got some that are very highly advanced where if there's contamination involved in the DNA, some of them may not be equipped to eliminate or dispose of that contamination.
Absolutely.
To pull out or the proper sequence to go in further into the sample. For example, Dr. Todd Disseltel, out of his lab, they're very advanced. They're one of the top advanced labs in the country. And so they have, him, and I do believe Dr. Sykes, as you had mentioned, I know he's out of Oxford University. I know they're very highly advanced in their technology and what they do have, and they have that ability to abstract or to eliminate any kind of thing. So to me, when you had shared that, it sounds like something may have been contaminated. Oh, that's a possibility anyway. That what I feel like, but so.
Well, it is a possibility, and it also depends on what the labs are seeking to reference. There are certainly labs that if they're given a sample and told it came from a certain region, they're only going to compare it with species that they know of that region. So you may not, there are. The only known primate in North America are human beings. So they're not necessarily going to look, much further than that.
Right. I know Zach is sitting back and listening, and normally he has some questions. I wanted to give him the opportunity before I continue on. Zach, do you have anything you want to ask or share with Darby?
Nope. Him and me pretty much covered all of it on Wednesday.
Oh, there's got to be something there. So, well, okay then. Darby, with your course and everything that you got going on, with your, the course that you're teaching at the university, as far as anything, where do you see this going in the future? As far as separated from the university, do you see anything where you can? Do you plan on continuing to pursue to look into this subject further as part of any project or anything? The projects that I have going around this, in addition to the course, as you know, Daniel, I'm doing my best to at least selectively get out there and get out in the field with amateur investigators who are seeking to do research in a scientific way or collect evidence in such a way that they would like to have it available for the scrutiny of the scientific community. And as you know, I went out in the field with you a month or so ago. Oh yeah.
And I think that
hike.
One of the things. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that was a good hike too.
Yeah, that was a great hike. It was an interesting day, and we didn't end up dragging a Sasquatch out of the woods, but it was a good hike.
Oh yeah.
So, but I joke about that, but my it's funny. I'll say, I research Sasquatch research. I had, Cliff Barkman of Finding Bigfoot fame, who, by the way, is a very knowledgeable and smart guy when it comes to the science of these things. He was gracious enough to guest in my class by teleconference this last semester, and students absolutely loved him and his approach, and was very, very, very thoughtful. I said to Cliff before, I said, look, I research Sasquatch research, and he says, well, that's kind of meta, right? I said, yeah, but I've never met a Sasquatch. So my interest, though, is in looking at this as an opportunity to sort of bring the scientific community together with the citizen science community, and that's something I'll be talking more about at the conference next week. But I'd really like to have more of a dialogue instead of just this lack of anything between these two communities, hardly. I mean, as you said, there are some few professional scientists who take this very seriously and do this as a part of what they do. This, to my mind, this is one of those things that it would be nice if this were an open question. It would be nice if there could be more of a dialogue. I think that would be very useful for the amateur investigators to be able to really understand more about the science and the scientific approach to things, and I think it would be really useful. I think it's really useful for the scientists to be able to better understand, the world we live in. I mean, it's really interesting to me that so many of these folks who are investigating these phenomena are out. They're out in the woods more than most professional scientists. There could be a much stronger relationship there, and there might be ways as well that other scientific inquiry could be going on alongside this investigation into the Sasquatch hypothesis. For example, one of the things that I've talked with a wildlife biologist colleague about is, I think there are so many Sasquatch investigators who are out in the woods at night, out in the middle of nowhere at night. Well, that's not a place where humans spend a lot of time.
Right.
They're recording, or they, listening for sounds, that sort of thing. Well, how much do we not know about just the bioacoustic environment of the woods at night?
Right. Good point. Yeah.
Whether one records an alleged Sasquatch sound or not, there's a wonderful opportunity there to work together.
Yeah.
And I've got, this is one of the things that's been interesting. I'm kind of slowly building these relationships with some select colleagues to think about, how would we potentially look at evidence, or how would we use this alleged evidence from a teaching standpoint as well. So
right.
I have one colleague who is a forensic anthropologist and really interested in these things and really fascinated by this set of casts that actually John Bindernagel has gifted to me for teaching. And I've got another colleague who really is not sold at all on the idea of, the existence of Sasquatch. Thinks it's probably a crazy idea, not impossible. She's an analytic chemist, but she's really interested because she's training her students how to identify samples of various things. So like hair, for example. How do you identify this? Not at a DNA level, but, through morphological analysis, using all these different chemical tools. And, she's very open to the idea of, well, hey, if we can have the students looking at, quote unquote, real samples, things that are truly unknown, with the idea that they might find something really interesting there. That's so much more interesting than just giving them a piece of hair that you know what it is and
right.
having them go through this just for the learning purposes. Why not have them doing something that could potentially be interesting and
right.
serve this type of research?
Absolutely. Now, I had another question for you here, and I don't know if this is something you plan on covering next weekend or not. But, as far as collecting evidence, if there's The one thing I know you had mentioned in the past, in one of our discussions, is that you believe there should be a protocol involved when collecting evidence. I was wondering if you'd like to you maybe touch base on that and share that for, especially the, the novels or, as you said, the, anyone that's out there claiming to find this evidence, regardless if it's a track or, a hair sample or anything. If you like to touch base on that, I think that would be a good thing to cover, and for anyone that, because this will be having a lot more views later. So
yeah. Well, I think and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on that, but certainly a protocol is basically a structured way of collecting evidence, such that it can actually be subjected to scientific scrutiny within particular fields. And so, like you mentioned a few minutes ago about the possibility in a DNA study of human contamination. A protocol for collecting evidence that's going to be examined in that way would certainly include not touching it, a person not touching it, because of that potential for contamination. Because we humans are we're sloughing off skin cells all the time. This is one of the difficult questions, I think, when you're dealing with a real world issue, in particular when you're dealing with an unknown like this. It's something I have my students think about in the course, and something that I'm, still struggling to figure out is to think about these protocols in ways that would not just satisfy one particular way of inquiring about the evidence, but so that the evidence could potentially be used by those in different scientific disciplines. And I think that's key because, like I mentioned, working with a chemist. Well, a chemist uses a different approach to studying evidence than I pick something else in wildlife biology. There are even different kinds of chemists. I mean, this is the thing. There are a lot of different. If you sort of think about it as the different. There's a lot of different perspectives you can take on any issue, and each scientific discipline has its own way of looking, and this is why a lot of the work that I do in terms of bringing research teams together is so important, because you need people with these different perspectives, and they especially need to be able to think about, okay, what are the gaps, or what are the where are the cracks in between my discipline and your discipline?
Right.
What do we not see? Because okay, you've got one person who's looking at this, say, who's looking at the DNA. You've got somebody who's looking at, whatever the other aspect is. I mean, the late hour is starting to get to me a little bit here, but you kind of got to think about, okay, if this is evidence that we don't know. Like, for example, here's a great example. We're looking at footprint evidence, okay, and
right.
A few folks are casting things. Well, there is a difference in the way that a forensic anthropologist, for example, will look at this type of evidence, and say a paleoanthropologist. There's a difference between the way a wildlife biologist approaches a problem versus a primatologist. And I mean, I think this starts to get at also explaining why this is such a thorny area of study, because it's, we don't really know what it is that we're studying. So we sort of have to take these different approaches and kind of see what is perhaps the most fruitful in examining the evidence that we have. And it's really interesting because you can look at stuff like that, for example, and you can kind of see, well, is the motility of the foot? What's the interaction between that foot and the substrate? Are there things that we can infer about the underlying bone structure or what have you of this creature? But we've got an unknown, and we have to kind of look at it. An anatomist who works with human feet is going to look at it in a slightly different way than a paleoanthropologist who's used to looking at maybe fossilized prints of early hominids versus a primatologist who's working with living primates. And we don't know exactly what we're dealing with, so we really have to try to make this evidence, make this evidence available for all possible angles.
Right. Yeah, you were talking about, as far as, when we find a piece of evidence, especially if it's very compelling, when we observe it, like, hey, we found some tracks. Man, these are awesome looking tracks. And I guess it goes, especially to, all of us, amateur researchers who are out there, we're not science-based, although some of us want to take it, to a scientific, extent. But when, one thing I could personally relate, I know when I find things out there, I do, like, for, not just a track, but it could be anything. If I feel it's Bigfoot related, and I do try to rule things out. That might be a small part of science right there. But as far as finding a track, I of all people could easily say science is easily neglected. It's not, it's one thing, it's probably the last thing that's on our mind when we're observing something like that out in the field. We're when we find a track that's humanoid and it's a perfect looking track, I mean, we're already convinced to ourselves that, this is Bigfoot, So, again, to me, I guess, science is neglected. There is other ways that we should be looking at that and other, considerations that we should have for what we're observing. I know one of them that you mentioned to me, which would be perfect, hey, if there's more than one, we should take photos. We should collect soil,
right.
And all these little things.
Right.
And those are the things that we don't think about. We're just caught up in that moment of our observation, in our findings.
Yeah.
So
well,
I can easily understand how that is.
One of the things. Yeah, and like I say, I'm not, I'm not the world expert on this. But there are certainly, I think that if someone is serious about collecting this type of evidence, and I hope that a lot of people listening to this are, because we need more of it, then certainly being prepared to cast tracks is very important. I think that practicing doing that is very important. There are little things that, like, for example, probably the biggest thing that a lot of folks just wouldn't naturally think of is that if you find multiple tracks, and are not able, ideally you want to cast them all. If you found a trail of tracks and could only cast two, what you'd want to do is you'd want to cast the best two of the same foot. So two right feet or two left feet. if I recall correctly, I think when the Patterson-Gimlin film was shot, I think that Bob Gimlin went back and cast a right and a left because, you know, that's what you think of. You think, oh, we want to get one of these. But actually, for scientists investigating this, it's much more useful to have two of the same foot because the track is not it's not an impression of the foot per se. It is an impression of the foot's movement and interaction with the substrate, the soil, in that particular step. And so if you think about, and you can do this with your own foot right now, just think about how you take a step. Now, human beings, most of us, we push down really hard with the heel at the start of the step. We kind of roll our foot and push off with the toes.
With the ball,
Most of us, with the ball. Not all humans walk like that.
Right.
And so, and if you think about, you know, the type of soil that you're stepping in, you know, sometimes even in two consecutive tracks with the same foot, your track might look very different, especially if you think about it bare feet rather than shoes. Your track might look very different depending on that substrate, depending on were you turning at that point, were you going uphill, were you going downhill, was there any kind of grade whatsoever, were you running, were you walking, and these things, that sort of evidence is much more compelling and much more informative to a scientist who's looking at those tracks, because then they can see something about perhaps how whatever left this track is walking. What are the mechanics of that step? You see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
And so you can actually, you know, that those two consecutive prints have so much more information than having one of each. The other thing is that quite frankly, it is not that difficult. As my students found for their assignment this last semester, it is really not that difficult to come up with a possible hoaxed print. It is a lot more difficult of a proposition to hoax an alleged Sasquatch print convincingly in that two consecutive prints of the same foot. So one print, there's probably no way that one print could be vetted as authentic.
Hello?
Hello. Yeah, that's period. Yeah,
okay,
I mean, if you have one print, I mean, there's really no way to vet that one print is authentic as opposed to hoax. And you know, and that's the other unfortunate thing about this area is that we do know that people hoax these things.
Right.
We do know that happens. And it presents a real challenge, I think, to anybody who wants to look at this scientifically, because, you know, we don't have that problem in a lot of other fields. We don't, you know, for example, scientists rely very heavily on citizen scientists who are bird watchers, and who do bird counts and report the bird songs that they hear and what species they see in particular areas. Maybe somebody does it, but we don't have widespread evidence that people are saying, "Oh, I saw this type of bird in this place where it totally shouldn't be." You know, we don't think that people are making that up. But unfortunately, when it comes to prints and things like that, we we do know that some of them are hoaxed. We don't know that all of them are hoaxed, but we certainly do know that some of them are.
Yeah. Yeah, we know that Bigfoot hoaxing dates back from the 1950s. What's his name? Ray Wallace. Ray Wallace was known as a Bigfoot hoaxer. He got he had what is it, wooden feet or something like that.
The Ray Wallace story is actually
it is interesting because
it's a long and very interesting story, and I don't know a whole lot about what you can conclude about it. I think a lot of people use the fact that Ray Wallace had these feet as an argument that the argument's even been made that he hoaxed every instance of finding tracks throughout the Pacific Northwest for 30 years, which but there's a lot of reason to disbelieve that, not the least of which would be it would be kind of crazy to have one person doing that, and the other is that the fake feet that his family later produced, none of them actually matched the prints that he supposedly made with them. So I don't know what to make of all that.
Yeah, I was actually just looking something else up here. Relating to I was just looking up some Bigfoot track hoaxes. There's one actually Cliff Brackman actually had investigated back in 2012.
London Trackway?
That's it. The London Trackway.
London Trackway? Yeah.
Yep. In Eugene, Oregon.
That was interesting. That was interesting because that was that was a very extensive track. The backstory around that sounded a little fishy to me when I first heard it, and I think Cliff was somewhat skeptical of those tracks from the get-go, because he certainly looked at a lot of ledge tracks, maybe more than anybody. Between he and Jeff Meldrum and John Pendergrass, I mean, they've probably seen definitely many more than most researchers. And that's the thing, is that that was a more that was a smarter and more elaborate hoax than most that have been uncovered. But even that one was not. There were a number of signs in those prints that really kind of are problematic. But again, I mean, without unless you have something making tracks in captivity that you can watch how it walks and look at the tracks and see what they're supposed to look like. Well, we're still dealing with an unknown.
Yeah. It's I tell you what, Bigfoot, I love, ever since I've gotten into Bigfoot, it's like I said, it's been a major passion for me, and I love doing it, and I ain't gonna lie, it's here and there, it's been a headache with a few things, I mean, you run into obstacles dealing with, different people, and and the more you get involved with it, as I'm learning, you deal more and more with people, especially if you're taking in reports and everything. So
I'm sure. I mean,
that's another thing that's been challenging, as far as trying to keep up with the reports. I mean, I've heard of a few here and there, but I haven't tried to take any on recently. It's, there was one that was fairly recent, but, after making contact back with a person, and hey, they're not far from me. I wanted permission to go up there to go investigate, but I never heard back. So I was like, I'm not going to push it either. I mean, but I've had my share of reports from around the Shenandoah Valley, and some in other counties, but that are not far from here, But I take notes of these things, and I kind of make, I jot them down, even though I don't investigate all of them. I do take notes where they come from, and and it's interesting. And some are east of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and some are right. A lot of them are in the western part towards Alleghenies, and the western parts of the valley here, and some are right here, actually in the valley, which is pretty cool, But it's interesting.
Yeah, and it is interesting, and it's interesting. I mean, there have been reports of alleged Bigfoot sightings in every state of the union except for Hawaii.
Yeah,
and there have been reports that. I'm sorry.
Hawaii's got the little foot.
The little foot. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, in some of these, and it's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of the, if there's, I can't remember who it was. It was a PhD student a few years ago took just the BFRO data and put it on a map. And the map, in terms of the real hot spots of where most sightings are reported, it seems to correlate with what you might expect of a real creature, and sort of you might expect more sightings in places that one seems to have the type of habitat that could support a large creature such as alleged Sasquatch, and has at least enough human traffic that of course you're not going to have a sighting if a person's not there. But there are always a few strange ones, and I think that, I mean, for being frank, there are a few strange people. I've had folks say, let me show you I got a video of a Sasquatch, and here it is. It's materializing in my living room in front of the television. That's a true story. So you just got to kind of go with the flow a little bit, but that's I will say that I've really enjoyed getting to know some of the amateur investigators, going out in the field, getting a chance. It's great to have a great excuse to get out in the woods just anyway.
Yeah.
But also, I think that there's a lot of folks out there who are doing really good work, who are really down to earth, who are trying to be very thoughtful about it. And that's not the way, that's popular media. And I think that was something, I mean, it was amazing to my students to see the difference between sort of the reality television version of Cliff Barkman and Cliff Barkman.
Yeah.
And they were really impressed with him, and they should have been. I mean, he is, he's very thoughtful. He's very, very scientific. He's very knowledgeable.
And I'll tell you,
and that comes. It's very different. Meeting him and talking with him, and I've spent a lot of time talking with him. It doesn't come out. I mean, I'm not, and I think finding Bigfoot, it's a different. It's different than what you see on television, and
right.
He's much more impressive as a researcher, in real life.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, from what I know about him, I mean, before I ever met him, I was in communication through, email, and, we were doing emails back and forth, and, it was discussing, it was actually regarding the event and everything, but we got into talk about a few other things here and there. But when I had the chance, when I finally got to meet him in Ohio the year before, he's not your average celebrity, because he's not like he's not stuck up. He's very outgoing. And I'll tell you one thing, I was impressed. I was kind of shocked, because after meeting him, and then even the first time when we first got there, he was, as soon as you walk into the lodge, he was actually right there by the gift shop, So we went up there, got to briefly introduce ourselves and shake his hand, had pictures taken with him. But the next day, or actually maybe it was later that evening, or the next day, I actually got to speak with him again. They actually had the meet and greet. Everybody had a chance to meet all the speakers. And, I don't know how long. I was in a good long conversation with Cliff, and and we had a good talk about a few different things. And then from there on out of all those people there, everybody he meets, everybody he knows, I could be walking by and not see him. He'll call my name. He did it a couple different times. He's like, "Hey, Daniel. Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Hey, Cliff." I was kind of like overwhelmed. I was like, "Dude remembers me." I mean, he knows me by face and person. I was like, "That's awesome." Yeah. I mean, he's like,
well, he's a nice guy.
Dude.
He's genuine. Like I say, he's thoughtful. He's knowledgeable. He's just genuinely interested in this subject as well. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
He is doing his best to really investigate this well, and so yeah, there's a lot of great. I mean, I'm so thankful that I got to know John Bendernagel so well.
Yeah.
Oh goodness, I just cannot say enough nice about him, and he's just tireless in his efforts. And,
yeah. It would have been awesome to meet him.
Wonderful human being.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting. There's a lot of really just wonderful folks, and I think folks that share. I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me as well is I think again there's this sort of this image of and to some extent, I mean, I think sometimes it's even perpetuated by the producers of like Finding Bigfoot or some of these shows where you have eyewitnesses, and they're the ways that they're portrayed, the ways that even the shots are set up for the camera make these look like these hick backwoods redneck folks, and whatever it may be, and and it really does a real disservice, I think, to both to I think one of the big things I think is that there's this huge divide, I think, right now in understanding between particularly our urban communities and our rural communities. That's something that we're just really, really working out in this country, and I think is working out in the national scene, and in terms of economics and politics and you name it. And I don't want to get into all that, but one of the things that I think is really interesting that I find that with a lot of the folks who are really interested in the subject, this is an area where it kind of gets people together across the lines where they normally divide themselves. And
right.
I think that is really kind of cool. When folks find a common interest in investigating this phenomena, some of them are far right, some of them are far left, some of them don't care, some of them are white, some of them are black, some of them are, men,
like a reddish brown.
There's this,
oh, yeah.
or whatever, and I mean, I think that, and not to say that it's not to say that it's this complete,
melting pot or mixed salad or whatever metaphor you want to use. But I do think that this becomes a place where, where people, can, do genuinely connect. And I think I'd like to see that. I think there's a real opportunity for that to be something that happens between, the citizen science community and the scientific community. I think that it would be really nice if those communities could at least understand, at least get to know each other as people on some other level than the ways that we seem to be dividing ourselves these days.
Hey, Darby, you want to hold on a second? We actually have we have somebody that's just called in. I thought I'd check them out.
All right.
Area code 304. You're live on Squatch Zone Radio. Do you have a question for the guest, or are you just listening?
Oh, yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
If you were going to start trying to research Bigfoot, what kind of things do you think you would want to bring to start with? Like
in terms of like equipment out to the field or that sort of thing?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great question. I think that, and probably several different possibilities, but I think just off the top of my head, I've talked about the importance of, casting prints. I think I definitely, practice doing that and bring something to cast prints if you're fortunate enough to find them. Definitely a camera.
Yeah, most definitely.
Definitely a camera. I think depending on so much is going to depend on, when you're going out, what you're, really what you're looking for. You definitely want to bring things like just a tape measure or something along those lines, because if you're going to take pictures of prints or what have you, you need to have that reference for size, for measurement.
Were you doing one of each foot of like both right foot? Would you want to go and measure the distance between the stride as well? Yes.
And you'd want to record as much of that information as you possibly could. You'd want to, like I say, you want to take pictures. You want to take pictures with objects of scale. You'd want to measure stride, and I think you need to, and actually different fields measure stride in slightly different ways. But I think as long as you have the length of the print and the length between the prints, you'll be able to figure out what they needed to know one way or the other. You'd want to ideally be able to make observations, record observations. If you found prints, you'd want to record observations about, like, if there were some way that you could at least estimate the grade. Is this walking uphill? Is this walking downhill? Is this a flat surface? Something about the soil. I think there's possibility in the future of really thinking about, collecting soil samples. I think in an ideal world, if I were to find prints, I'd want to record everything about them and take the pictures, cast them, and all that, and then, without having touched them, probably collect the soil itself. I think that's something that typically researchers have not done, but there is the possibility of finding, for example, trace genetic material in there, or other types of information that could potentially be evident, being extant within the tribe. If you're going out in the daytime, sorry, go ahead.
Whenever you're doing genetic material and stuff, like on forensic shows, they usually put everything in paper instead of plastic.
Yeah,
yes, they do,
exactly.
and that is very important. Yeah.
The plastic. Well, there are a lot of reasons. The plastic can interact with the material. The plastic, there's if you're in depending on the environment you're in, the plastic can cause condensation within the bag. It can be a problem. You do want to put it in paper. Yeah.
Yeah, it could possibly cause contamination with the bacteria that may develop through the condensation, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Yeah, and ideally you'd want to put it in an acid-free paper or cardboard, which it's sort of an archival type of product, which is a little bit more expensive, a little harder to find, but would be ideal. Again, we're talking about an ideal. Now, I mean, if the sky's the limit, the most wonderful thing would be to rather than casting, would be to bring a $30,000 portable 3D scanner out there, scan the print.
Everybody's got one of those going around.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, this is the advantage of being with the university, is that I'm about to have access to one of those.
You're bringing it up here to Virginia, then.
Oh, it's shared infrastructure. So what I'd have to do is bring it up there right away once the evidence has been found. But yeah, I'd love to do that. I mean, I'd actually, and I think that's going to be, like I say, that's the way that works now. But those types of devices are going to continue to come down in cost. I mean, look at the way everybody carries a camera with them now. Cameras used to be a lot more expensive than they are now. We're gonna at some point we're gonna have 3D scanners on our phones. I don't know why we still call them phones, considering all that they do. I think if you're going out at night, you of course want a good audio recorder. I think especially useful if you can have a good parabolic dish. If you're trying to single out particular sounds. It really, I have gone out with researchers and brought out, the FLIR cameras, the infrared cameras, and such, and they can be very useful, but to really get the benefit, the full benefit of them, it's really good to be trained to really know how to do that. I've got an engineering professor that I work with who is just fascinated with this course, and he works with drones. And he said, if you find a researcher who's got a use case for drones, I'll set you up. We'll get a student out there who is an expert with this stuff, and I'm like, well. Because I happened to mention to him that, some researchers are starting to try doing some of this work with drones. He's like,
still good. The downfall of that. Yeah, the downfall of as we were discussing the other day on the phone, we were talking. I know me and you were talking about drones. Is for everybody that gets into using drones. Become familiar with the laws, because there is federal laws there is actually restrictions on fly zones, even with a drone you could buy in your local stores.
Yes,
it's crazy.
Yes. That makes some of it difficult, but honestly, it's a little. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it's a little bit difficult for me to imagine a whole lot of usefulness to a drone for this type of surveillance, except in very, real extreme cases. Maybe.
Yeah.
I
gotta. If you ever get access to one and bring it up here, if you ever bring one, I got a couple locations where I think it would be possibly very beneficial. if there's anything in the area, there's a couple open areas. I think it would do really well in. Yeah, yeah, because there's some areas when you came up here. Yeah.
I'm interested in not just borrowing a drone, but borrowing one of these expert student pilots.
Well, there you go. Yeah, because those things are tricky.
I've flown one of those big drones before, and I didn't do too badly, but you gotta log a lot of time to really be.
Yeah, they take some time getting used to them. I got 2 of them, and I still haven't figured them out yet. So, but
I think it's also it's worth noting too. I think that we talk a lot about forensics work, and I think a lot of folks think about obviously, I mean, DNA is one of those things that, I mean, at least at this point in this cultural moment, DNA has become this sort of almost magical, like, I think though that one of the things, and I think why a lot of folks are disappointed with the results they get back on DNA studies and things like that is, I think sometimes people are jumping to like a DNA study when they could tell a lot about, say, a hair sample or something through just even morphological analysis, or looking at it under a very good microscope. I think a lot of the disappointment people have with DNA samples could be ruled out because it would already be obvious that this is a known creature or something like that. The other thing is that I think that I know that the CSI type shows on television have really done us a disservice in terms of really understanding the science that's involved. They do things in 30 minutes or an hour on television that take months and months and months in real life, if they are even possible. And I think that's the thing that is really important to understand, is that in the real world, when they're working with DNA and forensic investigation in real life cases, most of the time they're dealing with situations where they know who probably did it. They have a very very short list of subjects that they're comparing things to, and they're looking for matches, and in an environment where there's a small number of wild cards, that works a lot better than in a field like this where we're not even exactly sure if or what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Well, I have a friend that has. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting.
I have a friend that had seen Sasquatch before, close to where his property was, and I know he would never go out after dark to go check it out. But I was going to see if I could talk him into going and taking me to where he had seen them before in the daytime, so that way I could see if I could find some footprints. I mean, they would have been old footprints. But
absolutely, daytime investigations are awesome. Yeah, most definitely. Just curious, is this Rose?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought I recognized the voice and the number, because the number I looked it up. I saw, oh, okay, it's West Virginia. So, and then your voice sounded familiar. I said, this has got to be Rose.
Yep, that's Rose.
So, okay. Well, Darby, for your information, you'll get to meet Rose next weekend. She is attending the event. So yeah, Miss Rose Dickens. So Rose, who you got coming with you again?
So far I have one of my sisters, and I've almost got the other one talked into it. So it'll be 3 of us. And my fourth sister I was going to take, she said that she don't think she can get from work, so I'm trying to see if she might be able to go anyways. But
well, I
we'll
tell
see.
you what, what's the possibility of getting your friend who actually had a sighting? Have you talked to him about it?
I will have to check with him.
Tell him, don't be scared. Tell him that's what that's what we're here for. We're here to bring everybody, people of all walks of life, and all that good stuff. So.
Just I don't know about the financial part of it for him, if he could swing it or not. That's the only thing. I mean, he could ride with me, but he can't stay in a room with me. So that would be the only problem.
Oh, I gotcha. We got a couple questions on the live chat real quick. One wants me to ask you, Darby, if you know if there's any a blood sample. Has a blood sample ever been taken from this creature that you know of?
Well, I mean, I don't mean it too facetiously, but I mean, no sample's been taken from this creature that has been, completely verified.
Well, yeah, that's a safe way.
I think there have been some interesting samples. I think that there was actually an episode of Monster Quest where they talked about analysis of a blood sample that came from a board of nails outside a cabin, a lake in Canada.
Oh, Canada. Okay, I thought it was Alaska.
No, in Canada. It was in Canada. Somebody on the live chat probably even knows what I'm talking about. But so I know that they had a pretty good reason to think that they had at least a dried blood sample of from one of these. This is the thing that is interesting too about hair samples and identification and DNA is that it's really most of the hair samples, in fact all the hair samples that I've ever heard of are just hair that people found in proximity to a sighting, or hair that they found that they thought was perhaps a Sasquatch. I cannot recall a single case of anyone claiming that they had taken a sample from the Sasquatch. Grabbed a handful or something. And so, I think that is one of the things that is, really important to understand is that when we're looking at samples, I mean, when they're not collected directly, people are not they're not. It's not like I had my blood drawn the other day at my doctor's office. Nobody's doing that to a Sasquatch that I'm aware of. I don't know. I mean, I don't think there have been too many. I can't recall hearing too many reports of alleged blood samples. Some, and like I said, other than that one, I don't remember. I don't recall. I'm not. Like I said, I don't know all of the. I don't know all of the alleged evidence like that. But and John Bendernagel didn't. I don't recall him talking about this in he has a wonderful chapter on physical evidence in that Discovery of the Sasquatch book, and I don't remember him mentioning a single piece of alleged blood evidence, but that may just be my memory.
Yeah. The next question the gentleman has is, it wants to know if you know anything about compression analysis.
No.
No. Okay. All right. Okay. He's got another question.
I know enough to say the wrong thing.
Well, there you go. At least you're being honest.
I mean, this is one of the things that I think is really important. I mean, as I talk about the science and Bigfoot, again, as I said at the beginning, my expertise is in the cultural aspect of this.
Right.
My expertise is in, my theoretical expertise is in, the cultural studies end of things. My applied expertise is in, getting scientists to work together, getting scientists, across fields, getting scientists to work with non-scientists, facilitating that. So I try not to get too deeply into things that are not my area of expertise, but I generally have folks that I know well, that I work with, that I've got somebody in my network that I can go to.
This next question might be out of the ballpark too. It's they're also asking, do you know of any primates that may have trace amounts of chlorophyll in their blood?
I would. I don't recall ever hearing of that. I would have a hard time imagining that, but we're completely out of my area of expertise.
Yeah, that's what I figured. We could treat this like a game show if you need to phone a primatologist or.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what I would do. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, chlorophyll obviously we associate with green vegetation. And so I don't know if I don't know if that question is coming from, if there's some theory that there's some kind of connection there. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I think that there are certainly. I mean, there are no shortage of theories, suppositions, just kind of ideas about what Sasquatch is, what it can do, these sorts of things. And some of those are certainly some of those are certainly more grounded than others. Let's say.
I agree.
But I mean, it's I mean, I think that the one of the basic ideas of most science is that you sort of go with the easiest explanation for the evidence that you have within the scope of your current theories of how the world works.
Yeah.
And so and that doesn't make that makes some theories certainly seem much more probable than others, but it certainly doesn't make anything conclusive. And so I think there's a lot of science. There's a lot of speculation, I know, among Bigfoot enthusiasts about a lot of these things, and some of that speculation is simply speculation. Some of it is grounded in scientific knowledge. Some of it is, I mean, it's, when we're dealing with an unknown. I mean, we at the end of the day, we really have to say there are a lot of things we just don't know.
Right, you're right, absolutely right. And the thing is, one thing based off of my observations with a great number of people in the Bigfoot community, Bigfoot world, the world of cryptozoology, a lot of us will agree together that there's no such thing as a Bigfoot expert, because again, as you mentioned, there's nothing concrete, there's nothing documented. We have, for what there is out there as far as any samples. I mean, there's always there's a question mark between none of it's been proven to be this or that or anything. And the thing is, I mean, then again, you got same people that'll tell you there's no such thing as a Bigfoot expert. But then again, they're coming out to you. They'll tell you, no, Bigfoot is this. Bigfoot's got, Thing is, we don't have nothing there's no documentation, no proof of nothing. But people are I've been seeing it for years, and the thing is, I was like, it'd be cool to believe this. It'd be cool that if we had an answer, but then again, that's the fun of it. It's a mystery. I always like a good mystery, especially in this field where I love. I love this field, and but a lot of people say, well, if Bigfoot was proven to be this or that, would the search be over? No. There's, as far as I'm concerned, me personally, no, I don't think it would be. But it's just like panthers. People say there's no panthers here in Virginia. People say it in others. There's several other states where people are saying big panthers don't exist, but there's people seeing them. Yeah. So there's evidence being left behind by them. I had found tracks here in Virginia before I even saw my panther sighting. So yeah. And the thing is, it's everybody's word against everybody else's. It's all hearsay. And the thing is, we have very little to prove. The show for it. If we do have like tracks, even Bigfoot tracks, alleged Bigfoot tracks. That. A lot of people, especially science, says, well, we can't take that as pure evidence because those could be hoaxed. So. But
well,
it's all hearsay.
And that's something. Yeah, that's something I'll talk about a bit next week. Is you have the Sasquatch hypothesis. I think it's fair to also treat the hoax.
Right.
The dismissal of this as hoax as a hypothesis.
Yeah.
And I think you can evaluate that. And I actually had my students doing that this last semester. The reality is like I said, there's so many things that we do not know, and certainly in light of that, collecting especially more physical evidence, the more of that we can collect, the closer we would hopefully get to at least being able to really talk about what is a probable explanation of these things that people are finding, that people are seeing, and I think that the weight of that evidence and is what's also going to really start to really get folks who are more expert in the science of this to really start paying more attention, and that's how we might get to a better understanding of what is this that's going on? What is this phenomenon?
Right. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to tell you what, Darby. I am very much looking forward to your presentation next weekend, and because I'm excited about the whole thing. Period. But I'm definitely anxious to hear more what you will be sharing, and everybody attending the event, they will have the opportunity to ask you questions there as well, because we will have Q&A sessions both Saturday and Sunday evening, and so you'll probably be crowded by a lot of people. There'll be a time for everybody to meet and greet with everybody, and so yeah, for those who are listening, I will throw it out there again. June 30th and July 1st in Fishersville, Virginia, at the Augusta Expo, is the ECBRO's first annual Virginia Bigfoot Conference. For information, you can find us on Facebook on our event page. It's the ECBRO first annual Virginia Bigfoot Conference. You can find your tickets there and other information as well, or you can go visit our website, which is virginiabigfootcon.com. And you can scroll through, you'll see a slideshow of all the speakers, basic event information, and you could also buy your ticket through the webpage. So, Darby, as we come to a close, is there any last words or anything you want to share before we jump off here?
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for having me here tonight. Thank you so much for the invitation to come up to the conference. I really look forward to seeing you again there. I really look forward to seeing all the folks who turn out for that conference. I think it's going to be a really great time, and just really looking forward to that. So, thank you.
Yes, Absolutely, you're very welcome, and I'm glad you decided to be a part of this. It means a lot to me, and bringing everybody from different walks of life and sharing their different views, to share with the public. It's going to be awesome, and for the listeners, nobody's forcing nobody to believe anything. We're just laying it all out there so you can draw your own conclusions, and we're just trying to bring the community together for other like-minded people and to spread awareness. So this is Daniel Benoit, your host of Squatch on Radio. You guys have a good night, and keep it squatchy. And meanwhile, Darby, you have a good night, and till next time, I'll see you next weekend.
All right, thank you. You too. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to Squatch on Radio.
This summer, wherever you're heading in the great outdoors, make your first stop the Home Depot for off deep woods or active sweat-proof bug spray. Right now, get any 3 for just $10 in your backyard or in the woods. If it's long-lasting protection you want or sweat-proof performance you need, when off goes on, bugs go away. Stock up now on off deep woods or active bug spray, 3 for just $10. Only at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing while supplies last.
Can a mountain sunrise awaken something deep inside us? Can a winding trail be the path to what we've been yearning for? In West Virginia, you can look for answers in rolling hills and hidden waterfalls and get back in touch with things that feel authentic and pure. Ask yourself if there's a feeling you've been missing. Then listen to the voice that's calling you to a place that's almost heaven. Find your version of heaven at wvtourism.com.